Hello and welcome to a special Sunday edition of Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine. Thanks for being with us tonight. You know, newly released emails suggest the power of the State Department was used to show favoritism to the donors of the Clinton Foundation. And in case you missed last night's Justice, you'll hear my open and my take on those newly released emails later in the hour. But joining me now is the author of Clinton Cash and Breitbart News senior editor-at-large, Peter Schweitzer. All right, Peter, good evening. Listen, you wrote this book, Clinton Cash, well over a year ago, and we are now just finding out that some of the stuff that you wrote about in the book is being released by the State Department in emails as a result of a federal judge requiring the State Department to release information that previously they weren't willing to release. So what is the latest in terms of the information that we are learning about the Clinton Foundation and that relationship between the foundation and the State Department under Hillary Clinton?
Well, Judge, I wrote in Clinton Cash about what I call the Clinton blur, and that is their blurring of lines between their private activities, some of them commercial, some of them are related to the Clinton Foundation, and the State Department. They were blurring them, and the problem, of course, is that ethics laws don't allow you to blur them. The emails that are now coming out as a result of the work of Judicial Watch and also Citizens United are confirming that contrary to the agreement Hillary Clinton made with Barack Obama, that there would be no overlap between the two, that indeed favors were done and access was given to Clinton Foundation donors by senior State Department officials. So this indicates the kind of pay-to-play that I wrote about in Clinton Cash.
And you know, what's interesting, Peter, is that we would not have found out about this, that the MOU that was signed right before Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, that she signed with Barack Obama. She swore that this was not the kind of thing that would happen. I'm curious as to whether or not, when Hillary handed over her emails that she said were work-related, whether or not the email that involved Cheryl Mills and the request for her email addresses that we just heard about was ever turned over. Do you know what the answer to that is?
My understanding is that Judicial Watch is saying that these emails were not turned over and that this is just another number of emails to add to the long list that were not turned over. So, you know, Judge, to put this into perspective, Barack Obama, to his wisdom, required Hillary Clinton, before she became Secretary of State, to sign that memorandum of understanding you're talking about. We now know that two planks of that they completely violated. Number one, they said they were going to turn over all the names of all the donors on an annual basis to the Clinton Foundation. We now know that there's at least 1,100 that they have still not disclosed. So we still don't know who the names of all the people giving them money. And the second one is precisely this. She said there would be no overlapping of the two, and clearly that is happening in this new batch of emails. Complete violation of her agreement with Barack Obama.
And you know what's interesting is, and I have the memorandum of understanding that was signed in December of 2008. I mean, clearly what the president wanted at that time was to make sure that there was no funny business. I mean, they pretty much anticipated that there would be, given the Clintons' history. I wonder if the president, forget about his expecting it, is upset now that he realizes that this was going on under his nose in his own State Department, that was being used to involve favors for people like Gilbert Chagoury. Now, this guy's a money launderer, convicted of that in Switzerland. Tell us about him.
Yeah, I mean, Gilbert Chagoury, and this shows and highlights the problem with the Clinton Foundation. We're all used to the fact that people on Wall Street will raise money for a politician. They want access and favors in return. But foreign nationals can't do that. They can't give to campaigns. What the Clinton Foundation does is allow people like Gilbert Chagoury a way around that to get access and influence through the Clinton Foundation. He is not an American. He's not an American businessman. He is of Lebanese background. a citizen of Nigeria, and you rightfully pointed out, charged and convicted of money laundering and aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise. What he did was help the dictator of Nigeria, a guy named Abacha, literally smuggle billions of dollars of the Nigerian people's money out of the country and put them into Swiss bank accounts.
Okay.
And he was given access by Doug Band and the State Department to U.S. policymakers on Middle Eastern policy.
All right, he was given access to the State Department, and they contacted through the foundation after he gave him between $1 and $5 million. Clearly, no wall between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. Anyway, Peter Schweitzer, gonna run on that one. Thanks so much for being with us. Great book. Everything you said is coming to fruition. All right, and joining me now, one of my favorite people to battle it out with, so everybody brace yourselves, liberal radio show host Coco Sudak. Okay, Coco, we now know from these newly released emails from the State Department that wall that Hillary Clinton promised would be, separate the foundation from the State Department wasn't a wall at all. In fact, it was probably a doormat so that you could walk in between the State Department. We've got this convicted felon, this Shigori guy, who was introduced by Uma Abedin and Cheryl Mills to a U.S. ambassador. We also find out that there's a FOIA request for information that we didn't know about that would have disclosed the email system that Hillary was using, and they denied having one. Aren't you a little bit concerned about the uneasy relationship between money and the U.S. government as it relates to the Clintons?
Judge, not in this case. I'm not at all. Thanks for having me on. Happy Sunday. Look, there was an absolute wall. Doug Band sent that email to Huma Abedin, asking Huma Abedin to contact the ambassador on Shigori's behalf. Shigori is a Lebanese, was born in Lebanon, and contributes money to protect Christians in Lebanon. But here's the thing. Shigori has not talked to Hillary Clinton since 2006, when she was a senator, not Secretary of State. Shigori never talked to the ambassador, and nothing really ever happened, which is too bad, because what Shigori was trying to do, according to everybody who knows really anything about this, he was trying to pass his insights along about the election in Lebanon and how to protect the Christians in Lebanon, which I think is a cause which you would appreciate.
Well, let me tell you why you're wrong. Number one, this guy who is a convicted felon, who is known as a shyster, was supporting Michael Aoun, who is part of Hezbollah in Lebanon, number one. He has said that the money for the foundation was used for the people of Africa and not for the Christians of Lebanon, and that is a quote. And just so you know, he was contributing money to the organization for an event in Florida, so he didn't have to contribute to the Clintons up to $500,000. So the fact that Uma Abedin, just to put a cap on this, is the one reaching out to an ambassador, she's the one on the private server, and this was not released through Hillary's emails. They hid it.
You know why?
We found out about this through the State Department.
The reason why it wasn't released on Hillary's emails is because Hillary Clinton was not a party to any of these emails. And those emails that she released were from her email list, her emails.
But let me tell you something.
And so there's no reason why it should have been. But more importantly, let's look at this. You guys are convicting. You guys are convicting the Clintons and going and scavenging for the evidence. The thing is, in this case, there was no pay to play. This was networking between people who know each other.
He got the entree. The fact that they didn't meet is irrelevant.
There was no entree. There was no communication.
The entree is Doug Band says this guy's a big contributor. Uma Abedin says I'll get right to it. They put Feldman and Shigori together.
And nothing happened.
The only ones who say they didn't meet are the two of them. I don't believe a word they say. Because they said there was wall. And by the way, you want to tell me why Uma Abedin is paid by the foundation and the State Department? Tell me why.
Judge, that's the point. You're convicting the Clintons and going and finding the evidence.
Yeah, that's what I do for a living.
And even when the evidence is turned up, you don't believe it. Judge, you're a judge. You know that you look for evidence. Look, here's the great thing. What's going to happen is the Republicans are going to spend another couple of $100 million investigating the Clintons. Nothing's ever going to come of it.
No.
You're going to waste your time.
No,
the Republicans are going to waste taxpayer money.
It's
And the Clintons are going to continue to run the country.
Let me tell you something. What you've got here is a woman who did not turn over these emails. There was a FOIA request for her email system, and Cheryl Mills says we don't have any information on that, and we would have found out about all this years earlier. Anyway, Coco Sudek, we had a good conversation tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Have a great night, Judge.
So which Republicans are supporting Donald Trump and which are not? Ohio Governor John Kasich says he has not made a final decision. And just a few days ago, a businessman who served with George W. Bush as Commerce Secretary, Carlos Gutierrez, joined a group of Republicans endorsing Hillary Clinton. Joining me now is David Avella, chairman of GoPac and a Republican strategist. All right, good evening, David. What is wrong with John Kasich and the Bushes and Cruz and the rest of them who are saying they're not going to support Donald Trump? Who do they think they're hurting, or are they just sore losers or small people?
Judge, no Republican nominee in the history of our party has gotten every Republican to vote for them in a general election. So this is not particularly unique that there are Republicans not supporting the nominee. Now, for Trump, he needs to go on and find Democrats and independents to come into his camp in order to win this election. But beyond that, and I think really to the point of your question, is that if you're not supporting Donald Trump and you don't want a fourth Barack Obama or third Barack Obama term, then what are you doing to make sure Hillary Clinton doesn't become the nominee? And even further than that, Donald Trump can't lose by a large margin and it not have a huge impact on the rest of the ticket. And so this fracture that some is trying to create only really hurts the down ballot because of straight ticket voting, you can't have a dominance of one side and yet it not have an impact all the way down the ballot, and that's what a lot of this does.
Well, so what is the Republican Party doing to rebut these people who are saying we've got to stop giving him money when the truth is that Donald Trump is part of an arrangement that's getting money to the Republican National Committee and the group that promised to vote for Trump? I mean, I'm absolutely stunned. You know what? Kasich is a small man. I'm not even going to refer to him as a governor. You have the Republican National Convention in his state, and he's too small to even show up. And then you've got Cruz, that Trump gives him permission to actually speak at his convention. He won't even endorse him. And then you've got the Bushes, who they all swear, they pledge they're going to support the GOP nominee, and they won't do it. Carly Fiorina said she would support the GOP nominee, and she won't do it. These people are not people who are worthy of their own word. So what do we do going forward? Every non-Trump vote, it seems to me, is a weighted Hillary vote.
Well, you make an excellent point. There are two teams on the field in reality that can win this election, and it's either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And if you're not for Donald Trump, then you're really giving a vote to Hillary Clinton, as you just pointed out. But, look, there are Republicans, as I started out saying, there are Republicans not supporting Donald Trump. That is not unique in an election. But the fact is, Reince Priebus and the Republican National Committee have put together a ground game that they are actively working. Press reports are that Donald Trump and Reince Priebus talk 5 or 6 times a day.
Yeah,
so I don't know how you can say the party
get along. Yeah.
I mean, Judge, I don't know how one can interpret that the party isn't behind Donald Trump when the National Committee is doing all it can with the resources it has. Plus, let's also look, what are the number of elected officials and Republican voters that are for Donald Trump versus the ones who aren't? Look, the reality is the overwhelming majority are for Donald Trump. And if we're going to win this election, we need to bring Democrats and independents into the fold for Donald Trump to win and for our entire ticket to win up and down. So, look, bringing new people into the Republican process is a good thing.
How does Donald do that? Look, this week we had an astounding revelation regarding emails that show the pay to play. I mean, the group that started the Lincoln bedroom scheme is back at it on an international level, David. And, now we've got Donald Trump talking about other things.
Yeah. Every day Donald Trump is talking about his ideas to create jobs and keep Americans safe in their neighborhoods and in their communities is a day that we are further away from a third Barack Obama term. Every day we're not talking about that. We're giving Hillary Clinton a chance, despite the fact that every week we learn something new that is disturbing about Hillary Clinton. And next week it's going to be something else. And it'll also, quite frankly, be interesting to see what those on the left who oppose Hillary Clinton, what they continue to come out with. I mean, this week we just saw where members of Congress had their phone numbers released. This wasn't done by a conservative group. This was done by a liberal group. So Hillary Clinton has her problems with her base. So that's what's going to make these next couple weeks, these next 84 days, in fact, very interesting to watch.
Well, it certainly is captivating the whole country. David Avella, good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Judge.
All right. And Hillary Clinton says Donald Trump lacks the temperament to be president, while Donald Trump says she lacks the integrity to sit in the Oval Office. New national polls have Clinton extending her lead, though. What can Trump do to catch up? Justice is back in a moment. So Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump in several national polls has widened in recent days, while a growing number of fellow Republicans have declared they will not support him. So what does Trump need to do to close the gap? Joining me now is Republican pollster Ed Goes. All right, Ed, good to have you back on Justice.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. I'm not even going to go over the polls. She's ahead of them. She had a bad week. An aggressive prosecutor could indict the woman. Now, she's winning this week, and he's behind. Why?
Well, I mean, first of all, both these candidates had a 55% unfavorable rating when they got into this race. They're still hovering around that amount. Trump's a little bit higher in recent weeks. Hillary's at 53%. These numbers are baked in with the electorate. They are not going to change a great deal. They both have a very narrow bandwidth on how high they can go and how low they can go. Hillary's tends to be a little bit higher. Bandwidth is basically, if you look at all the averages of the polls this year, Hillary's never broken 50%.
Right.
She's never dropped below 43%. Trump has never broken 46%. He's never dropped below 39%. That is their bandwidth. If he is at the top of his bandwidth and she's at the bottom, he wins. What we're looking at right now is data where she's at the top, he's at the bottom, and you're looking at a much wider margin.
And there was a time, Ed, when he was beating her in the national polls. But it seemed...
He was. It was a very short period of time,
yes.
and it was at the end of the convention.
That's a yes.
And the key point in that period of time was he was at the top of his bandwidth because he was getting as much support from Republicans as what Hillary was getting from Democrats.
Okay, and he's losing Republicans, or is she gaining in Democrats?
He has dropped with Republicans.
All right, that's what I want to talk about, so hang on.
Right.
We had all these honorable men and a woman who promised to support the GOP candidate, and they have not. I call him a small man, John Kasich, couldn't even show up at the Republican National Convention that benefited his state of Ohio because he was delusional enough to believe that he was going to be the candidate for president. Then you have Cruz, who's offered the opportunity to speak at the Trump convention, and he doesn't even endorse him. Carly Fiorina won't endorse him. The Bushes won't endorse him. And then we've got these letters this week, an open letter to Reince Priebus, don't fund his campaign, and the national security. What is this about?
Well, Judge, we're going to have to just agree to disagree in terms of John Kasich. He's an honorable man. I think the point is, I talk about the surveys.
No, he said he would support the GOP candidate. And he didn't.
There's a lot of talk about that, Judge, but those candidates came back at a later debate, and every one of them said that they were stepping back from that, including Donald Trump.
So you make a promise and say, I'm stepping back, and you're still honorable?
I don't want to get into that with you, Judge. I'm a pollster. When I say that he has dropped with Republicans, we're not talking talking about the names you're talking about. We're talking about everyday Republicans that are watching Donald Trump out there and fell away from supporting him because they didn't like what they were saying. Not because what these other people were saying, but what he was saying. And that is the key point here. He started off with a 55% unfavorable rating. It was driven by his persona. They did a great job at the debate of putting the focus on Hillary Clinton, of bringing his family into the situation and showing a different side of Donald Trump. And then he walked out of that convention and just blew all of that up.
Do you think he can come back, Ed?
Yeah, I think he can come back, but he needs to understand that what drives his negatives are his persona. If he wants to run a rough campaign, get other people to do that. Stay focused, be presidential. He seems to understand it. He said it half a dozen times over the last 6 months, I can be more presidential. There are Republicans out there that want to see it because they want to support him, but they're not seeing it.
All right, Ed Goes, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, and next up, my open involving the growing scandal between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. That's next.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Robert Gray. The National Guard now on call in Milwaukee. The Guard was called into service by Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker following a night of protest after police shot an armed man during a foot chase. Several buildings and cars were set on fire during those protests. Police say body camera footage shows the suspect turned towards officers with a gun in his hand when he was shot. That footage has yet to be released to the public. Flooding in Louisiana, leaving at least 4 dead, with more than 7,000 rescued this weekend. Days of heavy rain dumping nearly 2 feet of water in some areas. National Guard working around the clock to help. The governor warns the problem is not over yet and is asking people to not go outdoors. I'm Robert Gray. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Earlier on, Justice Peter Schweitzer made his case about the impropriety between the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton State Department. In case you missed Justice, here's that opening statement from last night. It wasn't about convenience, and this is not old news. She set up the personal server to prevent us from learning her private business. And it is only because of a government watchdog group and an ethical federal judge that we found out why this week. Why? Because Bill and Hillary Clinton are the Bonnie and Clyde of American politics. Now follow me on this one. Why would a woman, a lawyer no less, one experienced many times over in the ways of Washington, risk placing classified information, our live assets, the placement of satellites, drones, and our most secret plans on an unprotected, non-government, non-capturable server? Why would she violate federal regulations upon which she was schooled just before she became Secretary of State, not to mention violate federal criminal laws that would put her in jail? She's too smart to do that. Why would she take the time to make the effort to hide, destroy, and delete 33,000 emails? Now we know. She did it for the most selfish of reasons, the oldest of motives. She did it for greed and for power and for the almighty dollar. She did it to hide her shady Clinton Foundation dealings. She did it in order to do favors for Clinton donors and to put a price tag on our State Department. The same duo who came up with a scheme to rent out the Lincoln bedroom is back in business with a new and bigger scheme, one that is more far-reaching and worldwide, one that violates not only the law, but all codes of moral and ethical conduct in government. A couple willing to sell anything to the highest bidder for money and power. This is why the emails were hidden from the beginning, and this is why they were ultimately destroyed and deleted. This This week, we find out top State Department aide Cheryl Mills, formerly of the President Bill Clinton impeachment team, aligned with Hillary ever since, and also on that private server, was advised in 2012 that a Freedom of Information request was made for the number of email accounts used by Hillary Clinton. Now, dozens of senior officials throughout the State Department, including Clinton's immediate staff, obviously concerned, exchanged emails with the secretary and Cheryl Mills. They actually used the personal account to discuss the official business and advise her of this FOIL request. Their response to the request? There were no records. They were in active defense mode to hide their scheme. And when truth is put to the lie, that in fact there was an email account, they say they made a mistake. Had they been honest, that personal server would have been exposed years earlier. And also this week, we find out a clear pay-to-play relationship between the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton State Department. An urgent email from Doug Band, formerly assistant to President Bill Clinton, now overseeing the Clinton Foundation, to Cheryl Mills and Huma Abedin, those two jewels on that private server, request that a huge Clinton Foundation donor meet a high State Department contact in Lebanon. The individual paid the price of admission, folks. Gilbert Chagoury gave between $1 and $5 million to the Clinton Foundation and pledged $1 billion to the Clinton Global Initiative. So, of course, arrangements are made for him to meet with Jeff Feldman, the former U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, the country where Chagoury was doing business. Abedin, ironically, paid both by the Foundation and the State Department, immediately responds with, "I'll talk to Jeff," ignoring the agreement between Hillary and President Obama to create a wall between that Clinton Foundation and the State Department, confident that it would never be found out. And when we learned there was a private server, what happens? You do what anyone looking to hide the evidence does. You erase, you conceal, you hide, you destroy. Now, I've told you this before. The Clinton Foundation is nothing more than a money laundering operation parading as a charitable foundation, where estimates are that only 15% of its money goes to charities, the rest to expenses, a veritable slush fund for Clinton operatives and ex-employees, a convenient way to get money from foreign countries and donors not allowed to contribute to presidential campaigns, but willing to dump hundreds of millions of dollars into a foundation of a powerful Secretary of State and possible future president. Why and for what? For access, for information, for power. Folks, politicians on a much lower level, of course, have gone to jail for much less. And we find out this week that when the FBI, 3 separate offices, approached the Department of Justice to commence an investigation into this so-called not-for-profit 501c3, the Department of Justice refuses to do so. You know, and Fifth Amendment pleading Lois Lerner, when she opens files on small conservative organizations, she gets away with it too. A few years vacations, a bonus, and a pension. So it's no surprise that the DOJ refuses to investigate the Clinton Foundation. No surprise at all. The collusion between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton was on display for all to see in an astounding meeting on a tarmac in Phoenix, while an investigation of Bill Clinton's wife was being conducted by Loretta Lynch. And consider this one. Isn't it curious how Miss Lynch is willing to listen to the FBI when they recommend not going forward with charges against Hillary Clinton? But when the FBI recommends going forward with a criminal probe on a blatant pay-to-play bribery investigation of the Bill Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, their answer is a resounding no. And you know what, folks? The Clintons, they're not even grateful. They are classless. Take a listen.
The FBI director said when he testified before Congress, he had to amend his previous day's statement that she had never received any emails marked classified. They saw two little notes with a C on it. This is the biggest load of bull I ever heard.
You know, the FBI's ability to lose decades of hard-earned and well-respected credibility is now on display for the country to see. You know, Jim Comey's the FBI director, and I told you, Jim, last week what happens when you run with these kinds of people. Jim, you're running with dogs, and you know better than I that when you lie with dogs, expect to get fleas. Jim, listen to that comment from Bill Clinton. Jim, my friend, you deserved it. When we come back, Donald Trump's newest attacks on the media. Is that a good strategy or a distraction that will cost him? Donald Trump is tweeting more complaints against the news media. He says media reports don't show the crowd size at his rallies, and they put false meaning to his words. Joining me now is pollster Lee Carter. Here's a tweet from Trump attacking the media. He says it's not freedom of the press when newspapers and others are allowed to say and write whatever they want, even if it's completely false. All right, Lee. You know what I think is interesting? And we can go through the numbers. Donald Trump is not doing well. And what is it? The last couple of weeks that his numbers have been dropping?
The last 3 weeks, he's had really, really bad showings and numbers, especially in some key swing states where he really needs to start getting a hold of himself. He's doing the best in Iowa, Ohio, and Florida, but he's still 5 points behind there. So he really has to turn things around.
All right, so let's talk about what I see as the external events that are causing those numbers to go down. Now, the New York Times has a headline, I think we have it here, that is about inside the failing mission to tame Donald Trump's tongue. You know, that's kind of an incredible headline. You know, they could just as easily have said inside the failing mission to tame Hillary Clinton's ethics, but you don't see that. You know, when he says that, you know, they don't report on the size of his rallies, I mean, you know, I think it was just yesterday in Connecticut, and yeah, there it is in Connecticut. Look at that. And of course, you know, in Pennsylvania, these huge rallies, Pennsylvania, of course, being a very much contested state. And yet all we're hearing the press talk about are the meaning that that they interpret Donald's words. Well, is this a different kind of election?
It is a very different kind of election. And look, Donald Trump is not helping himself. He needs to clean up his act and get out of the news with things that can be helped. There are things that he can't help. The media is biased against him. There's no question. But he's hurting himself in many, many instances. But when you look at the size of his rallies, when you look at the level of enthusiasm that's still around him, he has the opportunity to turn things around. Certainly he can talk about how things are unfair in the media, but he shouldn't be focusing all of his attention here. I always say when you're reacting, you're not acting. And when Donald Trump is at his best is when he is acting, when he's talking about making America great again, when he's talking about the economy, when he's talking about jobs, when he talks about taking on the establishment. He can complain about things, but he needs to do it more broadly, not make this so personal and seem like everything's getting under his skin.
But Lee, on Monday, he gave a great speech on the economy. And tomorrow he's going to give a speech on foreign policy, ISIS. And when he does this, no one talks about it. Hillary Clinton had had a horrible week. We saw that there is literally no wall between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department under Hillary Clinton. There are more emails to come. This week, we're going to get more information about the interview that she had with the FBI. You know, the one that there was no transcription, there was no tape recording. You know, all of this horrible stuff, the press is not focusing on it. So, I mean, you know, Donald Trump can do what he's supposed to be doing, and yet we've got all of these external things that are going on that are being played over and over and over again. So, you know, Donald Trump reacts to an audience. The energy is inescapable. I've been in some of those rallies with 20,000 people.
It's just he doesn't need to give any meat to the people who are trying to fight him. And that's what he's doing, because there needs to be airtime given to these things. All of the things that you mentioned that Hillary Clinton went through this week got zero attention, in large part because Donald Trump had been giving them other fodder that was filling up the airtime, and it should not have happened. He made mistakes, and he's got to move back to where he is. The economy speech was an excellent speech. Tomorrow he's going to be talking about national security. He needs to focus on that. There is a strategy at play, and there's no question about it, that the DNC and Hillary Clinton, everybody is trying to bait him into getting him off message and getting him down these rabbit holes, and it's working right now. He needs to not take the bait, and if he wants to fight these fights, his surrogates and other people should be doing it for him, and he should be focused on the things that matter the most, the things that resonate the most that he's doing, like when he talked about the economy, tomorrow when he talks about national security, and he needs to stay focused. One of the biggest criticisms that we hear voters say is that I'm worried about him because he's so thin-skinned. He needs to show us, and needs to show the voters that he's not.
Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Great to be here.
And we've got more on Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I took to the streets of New York City to get your thoughts on both nominees. This week, I hit the streets of New York to ask people who they're voting for and why they aren't voting for the other person. Take a look.
Here we are in the Jewelry District of New York City. Live.
But everybody here is a Trump fan, though.
Oh, good to know. What are you going to do about Trump? What's he got to do to get the numbers up?
Open his big mouth, that's it, and tell the truth.
I don't really trust him, so if he could be straight up and honest. It doesn't matter what stance he seems to have on something, you're going to find tape or voice of him being the exact opposite somewhere around, over the years.
But who's better at that than the Clintons?
Well, see, and that's where we get into the system where I'm so turned off about it.
That's what she thinks of the presidential candidate.
Yeah, miserable.
Who you voting for? See that ring? I want that ring. How much is that ring? 1,000? Who you vote for?
Donald Trump.
Why?
Because if Hillary Clinton wins, this country's going to go to the bottom. Donald Trump has a business mind. Hillary Clinton is a pathological liar. Everybody knows that. The world has to see that. America has to see that.
Why are you voting? Can you stop for a second? What about the fact that Hillary Clinton says that she's a better candidate? Is she?
She's a liar.
Who would you vote for, Hillary or Donald?
No. I will not answer this question. I'm sorry.
But it's America. It's free speech. Hey, live strong. So, who are you going to vote for?
Hillary.
Why are you going to vote for Hillary?
Just a strong Democrat.
What does Donald Trump need to do to move those numbers up? He's 9 points below Hillary.
He's got a little trouble there. He's got to be a little nicer to everybody, you know? He kind of has to bite his tongue a little bit, but I think he's going to do it.
Do you?
Yeah, Hillary's the crook. I mean, we all know that.
Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination. Now who are you going to vote for?
Hillary Clinton with our noses held.
What about the fact that the Clinton Foundation, has been collecting money from Russian oligarchs and all that?
Absolutely. Lesser of two evils.
Okay, well,
awful.
But what has Donald Trump done to steal your money?
To steal my money?
Yeah. Don't you see the Clintons as people who have gained hundreds of millions of dollars by being in the system?
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas Donald Trump made his own way.
Yeah, they are masters. They are, nobody is the system more so than the Clintons.
So, do you know who you're going to vote for?
I do, Gary Johnson.
Come over here, you. Yeah, I'm the judge.
You're the one.
Yeah, I'm the one, honey. Now listen.
I watch you all day long.
You do? Why, you outside my window? Why do you think that Hillary Clinton gets away with all she gets away with?
It's the liberal media. You know the story.
But at the end of the day, aren't Americans smart? Don't they see through that liberal media?
No, because they only listen to what they want to hear.
So what are we going to do?
We have to fight. You have to get stronger.
Me?
Yes.
Oh my God, they'll put me in cuffs.
Hillary Clinton has enough money that she can pay them off.
But Donald Trump has money too.
He does, but he hasn't done anything like the Benghazi and email scandals for him to be investigated by him.
This lady who did not do nothing in the last 8 years between her and her husband, now she says, I'll do things better for you. Why was she sleeping for so many years?
She's tired. Donald told you that. Okay, don't make me chase you. Okay, why you voting for Hillary?
I would not vote for Donald Trump.
Why?
Donald Trump is trying to destroy the U.S.
He is?
Yes.
And is Hillary trying to rebuild it?
Yes, she is.
All right, look at the skyscraper here. Who the hell built this skyscraper? Not Hillary. All right, now who are you voting for?
I'm still voting for Hillary.
Then I'm done.
All right.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much.